Salvete omnes, this is I'm Amelia, also known as TheMartianGeek, and we're going to close out Mega Man 10 by discussing my thoughts on the game. So, how about that Mega Man 10? Honestly, I think it's easily one of the higher tier entries in the series. I can never decide if my favorite is Mega Man 9, 10, or 11, but I've definitely narrowed it down to those three, though I do think that Mega Man 8 and especially 7 are underrated. It seems like overall the series kept getting better as it progressed, which was certainly not true for Mega Man X. The quality of those was all over the place, and nobody can agree on which ones are the best or worst. I think Mega Man 10 also has one of the best soundtracks. I'm not sure if it's better than Mega Man 3's, but it's up there. The game was, for the most part, surprisingly fair. This one really didn't have a nightmare boss like so many Mega Man games do. It had some bosses that were hard, yes, but even the ones that gave me a lot of trouble, like Solar Man, Nitro Man, and Enker, all felt like they mostly just needed to be practiced a lot. None of them really felt unfair or like I had to get lucky to beat them effectively. There was no Quick Man, Shadow Man, or Slash Man. For that matter, none of them felt like I absolutely had to have their weakness. Yeah, I did use Enker's weakness, but that was mainly because I was sick of doing that entire long stage over every time. There also weren't any bosses like Electman or Iceman whose main difficulty was just dealing ridiculously high damage, unless of course you're playing as Proto Man. On that note, the additional characters I can kinda take or leave. Base at least has some interesting changes that make you think differently about how to play the game, but Proto Man kind of just feels like a worse Mega Man. For all the additional things he has, slide, charge, and shield, they just don't do enough to make up for his terrible defense and low active shot limit. Proto Man always seems to get the short end of the stick in these games. And canonically, the story is about Mega Man, not either of the other two characters. The special weapons were a bit on the weak side. It was at least a better selection than some of the NES games, Mega Man 5 comes to mind, but it definitely stands out coming right between Mega Man 9 and 11, which both had pretty good weapon sets. Part of the problem was that half of them only let you have one shot on screen at a time, or even more than half if you count the triple blade as a single shot and or count the special stage weapons. This makes sense for the Water Shield and the Mirror Buster, but the others don't really have a good excuse. This is especially bad with the Chill Spike, since you can easily shoot, miss, and end up waiting around unable to shoot another one until the spikes disappear, while the enemy you were aiming for skips blithely along, completely ignoring your poorly positioned spike trap. The Solar Blaze definitely suffers as well, given that it's kind of slow. In fact, the only weapons where you can very definitely have more than two shots active are the Wheel Cutter and Screw Crusher. The Thunder Wall is definitely the worst of the bunch, though. It has a limit of 2 shots, and it is powerful if it actually strikes the enemy, but it runs out of ammo in no time flat and can't hit the broadside of a barn. It does reasonably well against Pump Man, but everywhere else, you pretty much need the enemy to stay at the same horizontal position and Mega Man to have a vantage point capable of hitting them with it, and if you're in that specific situation, chances are you can just pelt your foe with the Buster instead. I've already talked about how silly the plot was, but Mega Man falls solidly into one of those series that you don't play for the story. You play it to jump on platforms and blow up robots, and if that means running on Saturday morning cartoon logic, whatever. The stages were mostly good. This game probably has the best Wily Castle in the series, even if Stage 2 could drag on a bit. I'd say that the weakest Robot Master stages were Commando Man's and Nitro Man's. They kind of had the same problem, relying too much on one gimmick, the sandstorms for Commando Man and the trucks for Nitro Man. At least Nitro Man's stage and gimmick were pretty quick to get through, though, whereas Commando Man's Sandstorms absolutely killed the pacing of that stage. You know, gimmicks that rely on waiting in one place for several seconds for something to move or turn off or on rarely end up being all that fun. See also Valley of Bowser 2. Yes, there are parts where you can go fast because the wind is at your back, but then you have to deal more with the Mets and those annoying pit enemies, so they're less likely to kill the pacing, but more likely to kill your player character. And the sandstorms last even longer on hard mode, which does not actually make things any harder, just more boring than they already were. Wily Stage 5 had the same issue, with its amazing one damage sponge enemy type and even less going on, but I give it slightly more of a pass because final Wily stages rarely amount to much beyond a playable cutscene before the boss anyway. And no level in this game is as bad as a certain one from Mega Man 11 that I'm not looking forward to when I inevitably play that game on here. There are also the special stages, and my main thoughts about those are that they really should have been accessible outside of Time Attack. They're all interesting in their own way, potentially fun, but having to do them in one try just ruined them. It actually really gets on my nerves how common that is in games in general, having special optional stages that you have to beat in one go instead of them having regular checkpoints like the others. Giving the player a challenge is fine, but sometimes there's a fine line between challenging the player and just wasting their time, and checkpoint starvation, I would say, clearly falls into the latter category. But at least those stages are optional and have nothing to do with the main story, so whatever. It is cool that they actually give you special weapons, though. This might actually be the only Mega Man game where there are bosses outside of the main 8 that give you weapons to use. Well, I guess Mega Man ZX Advent technically had 12 main bosses, but aside from that... Overall, like I said, Mega Man 10 isn't perfect, but it is probably one of my favorite games in the series. Anyway, this project is officially over. Join me for whatever I decide to do next. I'll see you then.